Welcome, everyone.
Hello. Latino newsletter, Founding Rebels. Welcome to the first ever, from what we know, the first ever Boricua Town Hall, virtual Boricua Town Hall. And we're just going to dive right in. I'm here in Boston in a hotel. I've been covering the election, but it was too important not to moderate. And so I'm here. And before we start, a couple things. There's language options and there's closed caption options. And just choose your language and let's dive right in. This is an historic event. I am so powerful asking you this, even though it's very.
Sorry about that, folks. Just bear with us. It's inevitable that we have technical glitches, and we look forward to having Julio Ricardo Varela back on. My name is Erica Gonzalez, and I am the director of the Power for Puerto Rico Coalition. We build Boricua diaspora power. And our coalition stretches from Texas to South Carolina, Massachusetts, Florida, New York, Pennsylvania, Illinois, and Ohio, and other states in Puerto Rico. And earlier this year, we took, just to let you know a little bit about our work, and we do want to hear from you in terms of, feel free in the comments to put where you're piping in from. Earlier this year, we took Boricuas from 15 states in Puerto Rico to Washington, D.C., to collectively advocate on issues that the Puerto Rican community is concerned about, including abolishing the unelected board that has been imposed on Puerto Rico for 8 years. And then during the Democratic Convention in Illinois and Chicago, we co-convened Boricua leaders to send a clear message about democracy, which is that Puerto Ricans, when it comes to any status change, are entitled to full information on the implications of those status changes. And most recently, we worked with Boricua elected leaders in New York City to coordinate a press conference on the crisis that is the power outages in Puerto Rico under Genera Puerto Rico and Luma Energy, and this unacceptable economic and public health crisis. And there's more. At Power for Puerto Rico Education, we are training Boricuas across the diaspora in community organizing so that we can power up together. So I want to thank our partners in this event in collaboration, Casa en Action, the People for Puerto Rico in Pennsylvania, and La Tejedora in Puerto Rico. And I especially want to thank my colleague, part of the Power for Puerto Rico family, Cristina Rodriguez Greenberg, who conceptualized this town hall. We really wanted to provide a space and time to discuss the US and Puerto Rico elections from a Boricua lens. So we've assembled a lineup of Boricua experts who are committed to elevating our community. And hang out until the end because we have a special guest and close out for you guys. We were also intentional about who would moderate. So I want to say about Julio Ricardo Varela is he's a longtime journalist who understands the landscape in both Puerto Rico and the United States. And he founded the Latino newsletter, which has been sorely needed, quite frankly. And he's also a columnist at MSNBC Online. We're delighted to have him in conversation with our guests and to take your questions. And we New Yorkers will forgive the fact that he is a Red Sox fan. And I'm not going to get into it about the Phillies. So with that, please welcome back Julio Ricardo Varela.
Oh, internet. Oh, internet. Oh, cell phone service. Living in Boston. I apologize for that. Everything was good until it isn't. But let's just dive right in. We're going to set the stage for this town hall with a video by Dr. Carlos Vargas Ramos, who's the Director of Policy at the Center for Puerto Rican Studies at Hunter College, Centro PR. And this video is gonna break down the numbers of our power as Puerto Ricans. So let's play the video and then we're gonna get into the programming.
In the United States, we have 5.8 million Puerto Ricans, of which about a third were born in Puerto Rico, about 29-30%. The rest were born in the United States. So we have 5.8 million Puerto Ricans in the United States as of 2023, with the vast majority of them born and raised in the United States. We are distributed all over the United States, but of course, there are some states in which the Puerto Rican population predominates. So number one, the state with the most Puerto Rican population continues to be Florida, with 1.2 million Puerto Ricans, followed by New York at 954,000. Then we have the state of Pennsylvania with 472,000, New Jersey 449,000. So these are the states with some of the largest concentrations of Puerto Ricans numerically. Then we also have an important distinction to make, which is what percentage of that state's population do Puerto Ricans represent? So from that perspective, we have that the state of Connecticut, which only has 285,000 Puerto Ricans, nearly 8% of the population of Connecticut is Puerto Rican, which is a sizable percentage of the population. That is followed then by the state of Florida with 5.4, followed by New York, 4.9, and then we also have the state of Massachusetts with 4.7, the state of New Jersey with 4.8, the state of Pennsylvania with 3.6. So these are a couple of numbers to bear in mind, is the total number of the population that may be Puerto Rican and the percentage of the population in those states that may be Puerto Rican. Then it's also what percentage of the population in these several states are Puerto Rican, but what percentage do they represent of the Hispanic population? So the state that has the largest proportion of the Hispanic population of those mentioned is Connecticut, where 42% of the Hispanic population in Connecticut is Puerto Rican, followed by Pennsylvania, where 41% of Pennsylvania Hispanics are Puerto Rican, and then Massachusetts, where 35% of Massachusetts Hispanics are Puerto Rican, followed by New York with about a quarter.
Hey, so that's the graphic, and I'm going to read a couple of more factoids to set the stage. I have them here, so I sound really smart. 3.2% of the total population in Pennsylvania is Puerto Rican of voting age. Okay, that's the entire state. Okay, and we all know how tight the presidential election is going to be in other elections. So 3.2% is a pretty significant percentage. That's why last time I checked, everyone's talking about Puerto Ricans in Pennsylvania, and we're going to get to that. In Wisconsin, which still has about 15,000 Puerto Ricans, less than 1% of the total population are Puerto Ricans of voting age. Okay, so there's another place where Puerto Ricans are going to play a part in this, right? And then from 2010 to 2021, the number of Puerto Ricans of voting age increased as follows. Okay, in Florida, 321,000. Okay, over those 11 years. In Pennsylvania, 92,000. In Georgia, 33,000. And I also cited a 15,000 in Wisconsin. All right, so let's get to it. All right, let's just be real. The conclusion is we are part of the electoral map, whether in the United States or in Puerto Rico. And with me to discuss Pennsylvania is Karen Rodriguez, who's the lead at Pennsylvania-based the People for Puerto Rico, and Maria Quiñones Sanchez, council member of the Philadelphia City Council for the 7th District of PA from 2008 to 2022. I am a Red Sox fan. You know me as the Bronx Judas, but I also have a warm heart for Philly. So we're going to dive right in. We're going to be quick about this. Pennsylvania and the potential Boricua influence in U.S. elections. Everyone's talking about it. I've seen like 80 articles about it. It was like, there are Puerto Ricans in Okay, I get it. So analysts say the White House cannot be won without Puerto Ricans in Pennsylvania. Yes or no? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Let's start with Maria Quiñones. What do you think? Why or why not?
I wanted to let Karen go first. I know she's a little bit time sensitive. Karen, would you go first?
That's fine. I'm just trying to mix it up here. I'm trying to mix it up. We're staying informal. Karen, I didn't want to ignore you, but yes, do we matter? Do we win the White House? Do
You're
we need
mute.
the candidates need Puerto Ricans to win the White House? Yes or no? Why not? Go for it. I think you're on mute.
You're on mute, Karen.
You're on mute, Karen.
All right.
All right,
Yes,
let's do it
it
again.
is.
Go.
Yes, it is. The road to the White House goes right through the Puerto Rican neighborhoods in Philadelphia. I've been currently doing a lot of canvassing in Ward 7, Ward 33, and Ward 19. Those are the top 3 wards with high Puerto Rican populations. And honestly, if those wards break for Kamala, there's no way the other person from Florida will win. So it will come through those wards and some other wards as well. Without that population in Philadelphia,
Okay, so that's
it's going to
so you're
come
like,
down to us.
they need them. All right, Maria
Absolutely.
Quiñones.
It's
Yeah,
it's
Maria
Philly
Quiñones.
it's Philly and the counties, right? I like to say there's no path for Democrats to have the majority in our local House, in our local Senate, or the White House that doesn't go through a barrio, right? And while Philadelphia has the numbers, we are now for the first time having more Puerto Ricans and Latinos actually living outside the city. So that 2-2 corridor, when we talk about Reading and Allentown and all those Puerto Ricanos from New York that have come over, they make a significant amount of the population that is here at stake. And while polling still shows that some of the Latino males in particular need to be engaged, it is clear to us that this is one time where we can have the Puerto Rican communities not vote for us here, but vote for their families in Puerto Rico if we can get the messaging to them. And I think Karen will say to you, we're lacking that.
All right,
I
so
agree.
that's my follow-up question here. So we've established the fact that we matter in Pennsylvania, and you need us. We're, to victory. So the question is for you, Karen, what's going right and what's going wrong with this outreach? Keep it real.
Well, I think what's going right is there's a lot of grassroots organizations that are taking the bull by the horns. My organization being one of them. And we're doing it ourselves the same way that we did it ourselves when Hurricane Maria hit the island. We didn't wait for anybody. So a lot of the groups on the ground did not wait for anybody. We just did it. We're doing it ourselves. Now, things that are not right, I guess, there needs to be more bilingual literature out there. There's not enough. There needs to be more, I guess, culturally sensitive approaches towards a lot of the campaign approaches. I think there's a cookie cutter type of approach that's being applied, and what works in Bucks County, Montgomery County, you can't apply the same methodology to the barrios in Philly, because it's a different culture altogether. And I think those are some things that need to be considered if they're serious about winning the vote.
Yeah, so if you're listening to this, Maria, you're going to jump in a second. But if anyone has any questions, or I'm going to ask the people behind the thing because I'm working off my phone and everything's off. So I have access to no questions. So I'm kind of like winging it. So if there are questions about Pennsylvania, add them. Let's post them up on the board there while I ask Maria the same question. What's going right? This is great. What's going right? What's going wrong?
So I think to put it in context, people have to remember the immigration debate happened in Hazleton, Pennsylvania. We are ground zero for all the negativity that all of us are experiencing across the country around Latinos and Puerto Ricanos, right? Lou Barletta, Latinos, we sued him and he got promotion and became a congressman. Carville used to say Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and then you have Alabama in the middle. The fact of the matter is Puerto Ricans have moved into counties that are hostile against our communities. In cities like Reading, where you have a Puerto Rican mayor, Eddie Morang, he is being blasted by Trump paraphernalia, the Trump money, and all those things that are going on. So we're in hostile territory. And Karen is right. Just like Hurricane Maria, we are not, and we cannot wait for the party, who has never really embraced us. And we definitely cannot wait for the campaigns to come in and engage us. The messaging is still not there around Puerto Rico. There's a broader Latino message, the importance of it, the national eyes are on us. But I can tell you that on the ground, Puerto Ricanos do not feel engaged, and there's no connectivity to Puerto Rico and what's going on with our families.
Wow. All right. So we do have a question. So we're going to be brief because we got to keep moving the programming, but great question. What role does the Pennsylvania diaspora play in influencing political decisions and policy making on the island? Who wants that? Karen, you want that one?
Okay, I'm just reading it myself. I think, see, Maria has a point. The engagement or lack thereof of the Puerto Rican communities, not only in Philadelphia, but across the country, there's not enough engagement. But it doesn't mean that we don't know what's going on in Puerto Rico. We certainly do. Now, in terms of the policy making, I think because of that lack of engagement and allowing the self-empowerment to really take hold within the communities, people feel, they have a negative approach or a negative affect about the whole situation. Well, what difference am I making? I'm just one vote. But I think the bigger picture is, it's a collective effort. And I think in terms of policy making, if we get people to believe that as a unit, as a group, as a familia, como una familia, if we come together the same way we did in Maria, we can move mountains. And maybe this election, there's a lot, like Maria says, there's a lot of attention being placed on Puerto Ricans. And maybe the time is now to start getting people to embrace the idea we do matter. And if we use our political power in the way that I hope that we do, we can make changes made, not only here in the United States, but also the policies that affect Puerto Rico, including the energy disaster, because that's what it is. It's a complete disaster. And so many years outside of Maria, and we're still, how is it that our families are still dealing with electricity problems? Everybody knows how to fix the problem. We just need political courage to step up and make decisions, hard decisions that need to be made.
No, and
Maria?
the down ballots in this election are so important. We have Senator Casey up for re-election, representing Pennsylvania. He cannot win without the Puerto Rican vote, and we need to hold him accountable to being an ally to Puerto Rico. The down ballot, when you look at Representative Susan Wiles in the Allentown area, she could not win without Latino Puerto Rican empowerment and us coming out and vote. And so on this one, we get a triple whammy. We get the ability to decide the White House, to help decide the Senate, and we get to decide also the House if we come out and vote again with that connectivity to Puerto Rico and vote for our families there. So we get a triple whammy on this election.
Thank you so much, both of you. I really appreciate both of your guys' very in-depth perspective, especially in such a key swing state, as we all know, and we'll keep hearing about in the media. And I am going to move it on right now while Julio, figures out the tech. And I wanted to do a look at how our diaspora is feeling about key issues. So I'm going to discuss some early results and findings from a survey that we conducted at Power for Puerto Rico. Let me just do a little bit of an introduction. Buenas tardes, I'm Cristina Rodriguez Greenberg. I'm an organizer at Power for Puerto Rico. and I'm a proud daughter of the diaspora, currently in Pennsylvania. And so this town hall definitely seemed like a very good idea to me. And the bridge that we're building today is so incredibly significant. So thank you all for being here, and even for those who are tuning in the future. I'll take the opportunity now to urge you guys, for each of you to, recognize the power of your voices as Boricuas, and the strength of our collective influence as a community and as a voting bloc. Okay, so a little bit of context. At Power for Puerto Rico, we've been thinking a lot about how to distinguish Boricuas from the monolith of the Hispanic vote, or the all Latinos approach in politics. And so one of the initiatives that I'm incredibly proud to be a part of is a boots on the ground survey of the diaspora of Puerto Ricanos in their local communities. And we just initiated this effort in Massachusetts and South Carolina, where, as you heard, there are hundreds of thousands of us, okay? And yet our perspectives, our concerns, these are still going mostly unheard or misunderstood until it's too late, right? And they're often overshadowed by broader narratives that are whitewashing our specific and lived realities. And so Power for Puerto Rico is on this journey to change that. And so this survey that I'm about to get into is a step towards understanding better, the hopes and challenges that are emerging from our diaspora community. And so let me take a moment to go into these insights, which go into, which issues are top of our minds for us, and what we may be contemplating as we head to the voting booth, right? Like what we might be bringing to the ballot box this year. And so, yeah, let's get into it. Among all the respondents so far, a shocking majority, nearly 60%, were actually born in Puerto Rico. And so this stat really is interesting. It's something that stood out to me, something that I wanted to bring up contextually to start speaking about how this group of folks, how Boricuas born in Puerto Rico, living in the States, how they show up and how they're showing out in our communities, right? Their need to grow roots and create connections, and why, they're showing up on our radar so strongly. And so nearly every single one of our respondents so far reports having family back on the island, okay? And so for me, this highlights the foundational significance of our reality here in the States, of what's on our mind, right? As we approach some of the things that we see in our communities and what we want from our elected leaders, right? We don't just want to, bond over nostalgia and hopes and a few croquetas, right? Our realities are overwhelmingly intertwined with real concerns and pressure points back home. And so, for example, over half, 56% of all respondents so far express a longing to return to Puerto Rico, to live in Puerto Rico. And their reasons are deeply emotional. So I'm seeing, family connections, cultural identity, and, for that sense of belonging. But the reality remains that 43% of respondents, which is really high, these folks are saying that they actually prefer to stay in the US, right? Due to concerns about quality of life, healthcare, right? And economic opportunities. Okay? This is something that I keep seeing in the data. So herein lies the paradox, right? That so many of us tuned in right now are already familiar with. And that's that, and it's showing in the data, right? That we yearn for home, yet we feel compelled to stay put. So I'm going to give voice to some of these sentiments, Julio, because I want to, literally raise our voices tonight. And so let me just quickly say, from those who wish to return to Puerto Rico or to live in Puerto Rico, they express these heartfelt feelings. They're saying, toda mi familia está allá. Or they're saying, quiero estar con mi familia. Or I want to reconnect with my roots. So all my family's over there. Or I want to be with my family, right? And so for many, Puerto Rico symbolizes this cultural sanctuary, right? Where things like our community celebrations are fueling this like profound sense of belonging, right? And so another respondent puts it well. She says, me siento más feliz ahí, ya que celebramos nuestra cultura de muchas maneras. No puedo encontrar el mismo espíritu aquí. So she's saying, I feel happy there. You know, we celebrate our culture in so many different ways, and I can't find that same type of spirit here. Conversely, though, those that are hesitant to return articulate really well and usually pretty concisely, some painful realities. They're saying the quality of life is not the best, or no hay trabajo que pague lo que necesito. There's not a job that's paying what I needed to, right? So this encapsulates the struggle, the desire to return to a homeland, even if it's part-time, that for many no longer feels like that we can make it a home. If I have a moment, if not, I'll stop, but I can go into, which issues are specifically coming up in our research. I'll see if Julio has
Yeah,
audio.
they keep so it's hard to be a mom when you're muted. So I'm just listening. Yeah, I mean, you can share the issues. We have more programming, but if you take the next like 30 seconds, like the top 3 issues, we can wrap it up.
Okay, unfortunately, I didn't hear everything you said, but it feels like it was insightful.
I've just given up. Someone's out to curse me today. I don't know what's going on. What's the top 3 issues? What are the top issues?
All right, yeah, let's get into it. Okay, top 3 issues. Our data is showing actually one of the top issues is corruption, both political and private. That's standing out as a top concern, which I want to remind folks here that this is a call for us to commit to advocating for deeper transparency and accountability in our communities here in the States and in Puerto Rico. And then the other ones that I kind of already brought up, healthcare. I mean, you hear that in almost every response, both in the positive and in the negative. And displacement or affordable housing. These also emerge as significant issues. Education was a close one as well. And so all of these challenges, they're reflecting the realities that we face, both here in the States and on the island, except that when we say, stop the corruption or enough with this displacement, okay? It holds such a deeper place in our hearts, right? It hits a little different. And that's the nuance that we're talking about. It's clear that the Puerto Rican diaspora maintains a profound but complicated connection to the island. And that clearly has become even more complicated when elected leaders or candidates don't really understand the collective nuance, right? Or even the trauma of our lived realities. And so definitely by having conversations like these when possible, and then taking concrete actions that, serve to bridge the gap and empower the voices of Puerto Ricanos, we need to really see this as a collective and collaborative effort to carve out our space in the political equation. I'll take the opportunity now too to say that it's crucial for policymakers, to address these issues with nuance, okay, and context so that they can foster that real connection and to earn and understand our vote, right? There's a quote from some time ago that I saw back when X was Twitter, and it was a woman who said, they're not voting against their own interests. You're just wrong about what interests them.
Hey, sorry. So, apparently someone's out to get me today. And I think it's really important. And I don't want the technical issues with whatever this is to ruin such a fabulous conversation. So I'm asking if Erica or someone else at Power for Puerto Rico can run the rest of this program, because it's obvious that the app is not treating me well. And I've had a lot of experience. I've never had this experience with StreamYard, and I really apologize with my situation. And the last thing I want to do is make the moderator be a distraction. So if anyone can come in and take over the rest of this programming, I would greatly appreciate it, if it's possible.
Yeah. I'll take over. I'll take it over.
All right. I apologize,
I got
y'all.
you.
They, Boricua Power, this is my biggest passion I have, and it just didn't seem to be working out for me. And instead of fighting it, just accept it and keep up the great work. Peace out, y'all.
Thank you, Julio. Thank you. Okay, so then let's now actually bring up Mayra Rivera Vasquez, who's a community leader in South Carolina, and she's the second vice chair of the South Carolina Democratic Party. Y estás en mute.
Sorry for that. Buenas noches, good evening, and thank you, Cristina, for allowing me to be here today.
Yeah, so please go into it.
Well, I moved to South Carolina 10 years ago from Caguas, Puerto Rico, and so I part of a new diaspora, Puerto Rican diaspora, moving to the States, and in South Carolina, we represent like 16% of all the Hispanic population. So we are like the second highest group in South Carolina. And we are talking about 55,000 Boricuas that we have in there, living there. And thank you to Power of Puerto Rico. We start trying to connect the Puerto Ricans there. And the first thing that we did was doing a civic engagement training, where we invited some nonprofits and that Puerto Ricans were part of the leadership organizations. And then we started in this past September, mid-September, these surveys around the state, and it has been great. Every time that I go to a place to do the surveys and say, do you know that we are 55,000 Puerto Ricans here? Where we are? I don't know. Are you sure? And they're like excited. And the thing is, like, they want to connect, and they know that it is important for us here to being heard and being represented. Is always looking forward to doing the same in the island. I live in a really red conservative state, so it's really hard sometimes, to apply or to feel connected with more progressive ideas. So that's one of the reasons I'm active in the political arena. I'm the second vice chair of the Democratic Party. It's a way to access, to be sitting in the table to making the decisions that we have to make. Here in South Carolina, we have a supermajority in the House of Representatives. We are just only one seat in the state Senate for the Republicans also have a supermajority. That means that whatever we try to do, the Republicans, have the full reign to push whatever policies they wanted. And we are not in a good position. We are in the highest numbers in terms of gun violence, gun safety, abortion, the rights of transgenders, minors in schools. So as a bloc, as a Puerto Rican bloc, we have the opportunity to express ourselves, and in the way that some of us did in Puerto Rico, doing the same thing. Because if we live fine here, we know we could help our families in the island. And as you mentioned, mostly 50-60% of the Puerto Ricans that we live in here, the same thing in South Carolina, they want to go back, or almost like 90, more than 60% have families in Puerto Rico. So we are moving here, always thinking that in one moment in our life, we're going back to the island. And some of them, I remember one of the cases I surveyed, she said, I came here to improve my economic situation. So then I retired, and then my retirement is going to be in Puerto Rico. So we are like in a transitional position here to leave some couple of years because we want to go back, but we want to go back to an island that the island that we always dream of, better economic resources, better school, affordable housing. So that's something that right now here in South Carolina we are doing. We start, as I said, recently doing this survey. So we are hoping that even tonight and after tonight, people get more engaged and pass the word that we are looking for Puerto Ricans in South Carolina. So that has been my experience so far, and I'm seeing that in the South, that mostly all the states, the majority of the states from Virginia, Georgia, onto Florida are red states. But we are an important block and group of Puerto Ricans. We are talking about 113,000 in North Carolina, 100,000 in Georgia. We're having almost more than 1 million in Florida. We're having over 110,000 in Virginia. We are 55,000 here in South Carolina. So we could be as stronger as Pennsylvania and other areas in the country, but we need to be united. Even though I live in South Carolina, we could share ideas and support from my friends of North Carolina after Hurricane Helene, that we need to help them. And in the same way,
Mayra.
Could you hear
I
me?
want to be able to, I do hear you. I want to be able to move on to the national influence now that you're talking about the number of folks that we have down in the South. It really is about unifying our voice. I do see that question up on the screen, which I can answer. I'm happy to answer a little bit, which is, what ways do cultural things like music enhance Puerto Rico's or Boricua's visibility and influence in the broader U.S. society? And again, I think that this really is about strengthening our bonds, regardless of what state we're in or if we live on the island. So it's about uniting us and reinforcing the ties among our massive diaspora. And it creates opportunities, right, for conversations that are about Puerto Rican specific experiences. So hopefully, we can increase people's awareness, maybe their empathy. And then I think it's about, shaping the narrative of us, for us, by us. It's our stories and it's by us. So it's important to have our voices as part of what's representing the narrative out there. So with that, thank you so much, Mayra. I'm going to pivot now to the bigger picture of our national influence. So let's bring on Federico de Jesus, who's the principal at FDJ Solutions.
Hi, I'm also proud to be a senior advisor for the coalition and to work alongside Erica and Christina. And thank you all for tuning in.
Yeah, so let's get to it. My question for you first is, how are campaigns speaking to or not on the Boricua diaspora's concerns?
Well, you see in how Maria from Philly, councilwoman, was speaking, things that we've heard from other folks on the ground is that the Harris campaign is focusing a lot on ads, but not necessarily on the street. Puerto Ricans, Latinos, we love the carnavalesque type of atmosphere. We also want to have our issues heard. So that's why this town hall is so essential, right? It's not about just style and culture and Spanish and a little salsa music, but it's really what issues are affecting us. So that's on the one hand. On the other, I do have to say that the Trump campaign has put out some jingles in Spanish, and with his reggaetonero endorsements has brought this pro wrestling type of atmosphere to the campaign that touches some voters that are normally not involved with politics, right? So they're reaching in to very niche audiences, but in a way that also talks to them like they're anybody else, right? Not as a tiny segment of society. So I think that's important. And I do have to say that, given our work, that the Harris campaign hasn't put out a plan on Puerto Rico policy. This hasn't been a campaign about a lot of substance, frankly. They call it a vibe election. And I think that we need to see more of the Puerto Rican vibe in the outreach from both parties, frankly. The DNC said that they were investing $100,000 in reaching out to Puerto Ricans in Pennsylvania, which is great. But we see announcements that the campaign has raised $1 billion, right? So there are steps that are being taken, but with 2 or 3 weeks out from the election, I think that we should see a lot more.
I agree. Quickly, if you don't mind, what are the implications of electoral outcomes for the diaspora and Puerto Rico? What are like the big, whether it's warning signs or green flags, as they say, what are the good things maybe, but, the implications here of the outcomes?
Well, look at Project 2025. Mutual consent divorces would be banned. Abortion would be banned nationwide. The Homeland Security Department would be used for massive deportations. And as Puerto Ricans, we might feel, well, I'm a U.S. citizen, so that doesn't impact me. But we have Spanish surnames, right? We are Latino, and this matters. So it would be a national environment where constitutional rights would be questioned, with a Supreme Court that said the president has partial immunity on official acts. It opens the gateway to living in an autocratic country. And for Puerto Rico, it means a lot. The Project 2025 folks have said that funding for FEMA should be stripped so that we could build a wall in the southern border. And obviously, with Puerto Rico having so much hurricane disaster relief funding that hasn't been used yet, the threat of having a Congress reassign that money or use it for something else like the wall or for other states that have disasters is troubling. We saw how Donald Trump said that he didn't want to give aid to California because they didn't vote for him, and they finally released it after they convinced him that there were people in California that voted for him. We saw how he withheld aid from Puerto Rico. We've also seen, frankly, the slow spending under Biden, even though he released a lot of the Trump era restrictions, right? So how and what happens in Puerto Rico in this election matters. And I think we found out as a diaspora in 2019 that we couldn't just blame the federal government, that we need to hold our own accountable. So having partners in Puerto Rico, leaders elected in the island, that can present those demands to the federal government in a way that is effective is key, right? We can't just blame ourselves, but we also need effective advocates. So I'm glad that we're also talking about elections in the island, because those messages that we sent, even though there's a fiscal control board that basically governs the island politically, economically, colonially, but those voices matter. Because we have a Trump MAGA candidate running in Puerto Rico that supports Project 2025. We have folks that are identifying as Democrat or Republican, even though those aren't the parties running in the island. And there's a realignment going on in the island, right? With progressive forces uniting in a way that they haven't before. So lots going on that impacts real people, their healthcare levels, how the diaspora, again, interacts with the island if there is a disaster. So all of this matters for regular folks like people in the island that don't have the ability to turn on their CPAP machine every night because Luma is cutting off the electricity. How does having a Democratic or Republican Congress affect how do we hold Luma and the Fiscal Control Board accountable? How do people in Pennsylvania react to the different positions over fracking, over healthcare, over getting rid of the Affordable Care Act? These things matter greatly to the Puerto Rican community. And finally, affordable housing. We keep hearing it from Puerto Ricans in and around Philly and Allentown and other parts, Lancaster of Pennsylvania, that affordable housing is key. And Kamala Harris has a plan. We don't know what Donald Trump's plan is, but he is a developer, right? So we need to actually nail down what those policies are, because neither of the campaigns are telling Boricuas in arroz con habichuela, and neither in Spanish. And that's what we've heard from folks on the ground. And this affects the island, it affects Pennsylvania, it affects us as voters in this country.
Thank you, Federico. Yeah, I feel like FEMA you know, for me, when I hear that, I'm like, this feels like one of those like sleeper, not so sleeper issues that it would be such a natural segue into our community, right? Let's quickly answer this question that we see on the screen here, and then we'll get into Puerto Rico's politics. We'll move on to Puerto Rico's politics. So someone asked, what challenges does Puerto Rico face in terms of political representation at the federal level in the US? So this is really like a civics ed question. If you could give a quick answer there.
Sure. So from the theoretical to the practical, Puerto Ricans do not have any voting representation in Congress or for the president, although there are 5 or 6 members of Congress of Puerto Rican descent in Congress that and allies that, thanks to the diaspora, thanks to their political commitment, that do raise the voice of Puerto Rico. So the question that I would ask is, how is it that structural federal policies that affect Puerto Rico, frankly, that hamstring the island, are preventing that development that you're referring to, right? And we can go from the Jones Act that makes everything expensive in Puerto Rico to importing 85% of the food, to inequitable levels of Medicaid funding in the island, and obviously being a colony not able to exert their self-determination. All of those things affect people's daily lives. And beyond whether Puerto Rico should be a state, freely associated, independent, or continue to be a colony, these are the things that everyday Puerto Ricans are facing. And when Puerto Ricans are going back and forth so much to see their family, to live, or the migration back here to the States after the disasters, the differences in how food stamps are treated in the island, the language barrier. In Puerto Rico, obviously, the language is Spanish and federal forms are in English. And when people come to the States, the school districts operate in a different language, right? So these are policies that are decades in the making. And those are the structural issues that I'm proud of to work with you all on Powerful Puerto Rico and our grassroots network that are joining us. So thank you, Cristina, for that.
Thank you, Federico. Okay, so now let's get into Puerto Rico's politics. I want to discuss the human element of Boricuas impacted by political decisions in Puerto Rico with Aliana Coelho Exclusa, the program specialist and strategist with La Tejedora in Puerto Rico. Hey, Aliana.
Hola, Cristina. Hey, everybody. Thank you for having me today. I'm so excited to be here.
Thank you for being here. So could you break down like the parties in Puerto Rico and maybe discuss a little bit about the stakes in the upcoming elections on the island?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so I can give general broad strokes about what's going on right now. I will talk a little bit about historical context. So in 1952, Puerto Rico established el Estado Libre Asociado, which is the status quo right now in terms of what our relationship, what we have with the United States. And since then, there has been a big power dynamic between two dominant parties that have been in power for the past 70 plus years, and kind of like a give and take sort of power deal, which is called El Partido Nuevo Progresista and El Partido Popular Democrático, right? And they don't necessarily represent, Republicans or Democrats as it would be in the U.S. They represent in ideology-wise, a philosophy around what should be our status in terms of our relationship to the United States. So El Partido Nuevo Progresista, which is PNP, for their smaller acronym, represents, more right conservatives who are more focused on annexation and statehood with the United States. And the Partido Popular Democrático, which is more center-right conservatives, represents the status quo of the Estado Libre Asociado. Right now, as of right now in the 2024 elections, we have actually 5 parties that are running and have, been able to mobilize many communities. Out of those 5 parties, we have the PNP and the Popular Democrático, which are obviously, culturally, very much steady. But we also have the Partido Independentista Puertorriqueño, we have Movimiento Victoria Ciudadana, and we have Proyecto Dignidad. And so that what we're living right now is extremely interesting because we have just been seeing an increase in change and interest in, decentralizing the power dynamics between the bipartisanship that we've seen between the PNP and the PPD. And right now we actually have a runner-up for a governor who is part of the Independence Party. So that's actually extremely interesting for us at this time because it's something that we've never really lived before. A governor who supports independence actually have a chance at winning the elections in the island it's extremely new. And so this is very interesting also for this to be happening in conversation with what is going on in the US, right? I come from an organization that's called La Tejedora, and we work mostly with youth in Puerto Rico because what we've noticed is that obviously Puerto Rico, as many of you know, is an aging population. In the island of Puerto Rico, in the archipelago, we are not reproducing how we used to reproduce. But what we're seeing is that maybe it's not necessarily a problem about reproduction. Maybe it's also a problem about forced migration and displacement. So we have a lot of young people who are actually leaving Puerto Rico to go and find other economic opportunities, which is extremely understandable because we are living in very precarious condition. But our commitment to our organization is to organize the youth in order to create those possibilities so that we can stay in the island and for other people who have left the island have a right also to return. So what we're trying to do is to create, educational programs and fortify and amplify social justice movements in the island, backed and amplified as well by the diaspora, so that we can create those conditions that we need and want to be able to live in the island. One of the things that we have been doing during this election year is that we've noticed that there has been a pattern since the early 2000s that the amount of young people who are registering to vote continues to decrease, right? Every election year, it just continues and continues to this decrease. That could be due to many, many reasons. It could be due to what I was talking about, forced migration and displacement, people just up and leaving. It could be due to apathy. It could be due to discontent and untrustworthiness with the government. It could also be due to Maria, pandemic, just so many other things. But what we've decided to do is we've decided to take, like my colleague said, take the bull by the horns and try to create spaces and opportunity for our youth to be able to get involved with the elections. So we formed a coalition and we were able to register more than 4,000 new electoral participants, and we were also able to increase reactivation in voters. So reactivation as in people who have not voted in the past two elections, all of a sudden in this election, due to its historical context, are starting to get excited and starting to get motivated to be able to vote. And it's been really important to have this conversation up front in when we talk about what's going on in Puerto Rico, because what we're seeing is also a lack of I guess you could say of interest, a lack of resources, or a lack of connection that the State Commission of Elections is having with the youth, right? So the State Commission of Elections is the entity, the governmental entity, who's actually in charge of educating young voters, of registering people to vote, of making sure our right to vote is protected and that it is accessible. However, that has not been what we have been living in this island. And so it has been interesting to be living this, historical moment of parties that are not traditional to be in the lead. It has been interesting to see the amount of interest and motivation that new young voters are taking in getting registered to vote. And also, it has been interesting to see the reactivation of voters who haven't voted in the past 2 elections, who want to vote in this election, and also see the response of the State Commission on Elections and how they have been kind of dealing with the situation in Puerto Rico. So and that's where what we're doing right now is just making sure that the information gets out there, that people get educated, and that people register and go out to vote.
Yeah, that's amazing information. It really feels important, right? And especially with these reactivation, it feels like people are finding a reason to empower themselves, right? And to be a part of the conversation and to take back their their voices, their values, right? Whatever it might be. We do have a question on the screen. I really encourage folks to keep dropping your questions in the comments in the chat below. So let's address this question that's on the screen. What are the main factors that are influencing Puerto Rico's political status debate? Let's start there.
Yes, that's a great question. I think right now what we're seeing is a response from young people, yes, but I think a majority of people are starting to speak up more about this issue. And it's the issue of status, right? So what we're looking at is that people are understanding that our relationship status is not necessarily going to be something that's going to be resolved in an election year. That is something that is going to take, a long journey and processes of, different, be it conversations of be it public forums, etc. And just like spaces where we can convene and talk about this. But in general, it is being used as a way to kind of also gatekeep information within the campaign movements that have been going on within different political parties. So that's also been interesting to see how some parties have used their status ideology to kind of coerce and sort of manipulate voters to sway in either way direction. And so what's happening is that you're seeing that some parties are trying to kind of confuse citizens and make it seem as if that if they vote on the 5th of November, then the status is going to be decided that day, which is not necessarily true, right? That's misinformation. And so what we're also seeing is people who are getting educated about the status debate and actually wanting to get more informed about what that actually entails. So you're seeing two sides of the voter wanting to get more educated about the status, and then you're seeing some voters being swayed to vote because of fear of some retaliation that might happen or some sort of negative impact that we could receive, which is not necessarily true in this moment.
Thank you. Yeah, and I really think, when I think about additional things that are happening that are influencing these folks becoming informed on the topic, it's doing, the economic crisis, the natural disasters, these types of things are raising the issue. They are pressing the issue. And so how do you think that these things impact the relationship with the U.S.? I know it's a really loaded question, so just your opinion.
No, I can try to give some, I can try to answer some, right? I'm sure everybody here has a lot to pitch in as well. I think that what we are seeing is obviously a discontent with the economic and I will say specifically the austerity measures that have been put in place in Puerto Rico in order to pay back an unpayable debt, right? And so what we're seeing is people getting frustrated with how the administrative and political decisions that have been happening in the island are starting to come to a boil, right? And people are starting to understand a little bit deeper, like, wait, this is actually something that could that I could say no to, right? That this is not something that I just need to be able to accept. And so we have people who are leaving the island and going to the diaspora to find, better opportunities, which are, again, is totally understandable. But we also have to work in connection with the diaspora, because we have to really instill in us a sense of our right to just and dignified conditions, right? We can't just accept things because somebody decided that that's how they should be done, right? And I think that in that way, that the national conscience of Puerto Rico right now is starting to tip in favor of a more critical approach to how past administrations have been dealing with situations in the island. And I know that many communities in the diaspora have been following that and have been intrigued by that. I could say that tilt in information. And I think it's super important that also one of the things that the diaspora could help us do is in educating our fellow family members. If you're somebody from the diaspora community, to be educating your friends, colleagues, or family members, etc., who are in the island about not to fear to say no to unjust conditions, and not to fear the fact that, for example, one of the parties is saying that if this runner, like this governor who's in one of the governor running, one of the candidates for government who's running, that's in the lead, he's from the independent movement. Some of the parties are saying that if he wins, then we're going to lose all funding, all Medicaid, all food stamps, everything. It's just going to be gone. And so that's you're trying to mobilize people based off of fear, right? And I think that one of the things that we need help with is helping us understand, right? Being in the US, how that doesn't necessarily work that way, right? Like a collaboration or an alliance or a state doesn't just necessarily disappear because somebody said so. Like there's processes that have to happen. And so I think that's one of the ways that we can definitely work together. And also one of the ways is that we are trying here in Puerto Rico to the right to return, right? So one of the things that we're really motivating young people and also other generations is to continue to collaborate and to work so that we can create those conditions for a just and dignified life that we all know that we deserve.
Thank you so much, Aliana. That segues perfectly into the next segment where, we wanted to talk about, what are people doing to take control, to take power back? As Boricuas, how can we make a difference with so much going on and so much needed to address? And so I'm also going to have Maria be a part of this conversation or this push. But here's what we're doing. So Power for Puerto Rico is calling on everyone tuned in and eventually watching to make a direct impact in the upcoming elections. So whether you're passionate about boosting voter turnout in Pennsylvania or Puerto Rico, your involvement is key to ensuring that Puerto Ricans' voices are heard and that our votes will make a difference. And so we have an urgent need for volunteers. So I'm asking directly to please join our Choose Your Body Block, Get Out the Vote campaign. You can sign up to Text Bank or to Phone Bank. And this is something that you could do, with, a chosen beverage in your hand. It's not, you don't need to be signing up for door knocking, nothing like that. But your participation is going to help us mobilize our people's votes. And it's going to amplify that collective power that we keep talking about in these crucial elections. So you can help either Pennsylvania or Puerto Rico, or if you're feeling ambitious, you're feeling up for it, you can get involved in both. But either way, this is your chance to make a direct impact on the political future of Puerto Ricans, okay, at home and in the diaspora. So to get involved, just scan the QR code that's on the screen or type the following URL, which is also at the banner below. It is bit.ly/BoriBlock. So that's bit.ly/BoriBlock, BORIBLOC. So sign up today. Let's show the strength of Boricua voting power. Together, este grupo right here can shape the future, okay? So the road to the White House has to go through Puerto Ricans. So while you're all getting signed up to make a difference right now, I'm going to turn it over to Aliana and Maria so that they can also talk to you about, the impact and the influence.
Maria, would you like to go first? I can jump in while Maria gets settled. So can you repeat the question, Christina?
Yeah, I'm just hoping that you can, briefly tell me about the need for volunteers in Puerto Rico to get out the vote. And even if it's, language needs or just the immediacy, I just want to hear, boots on the ground perspective.
Yeah, of course. So with the coalition that we started is called Prende tu Voto, right? Which is Ignite Your Vote in English. And with that coalition, that was the one that I was talking about, that we were able to register over 4,000 new voters. And what the data shows and other research has shown over and over again is that the majority of the people who are able to who register to vote or reactivate themselves to vote in the months of like March to September leading up to the elections are probably going to be the ones who actually go out to vote. So we are excited to say that we were able to do that, right? But what happens when we have a group of people who are registered to vote but didn't necessarily register between March and September? And so how do we mobilize them to get excited to go out to vote on between October, right, and actually lead up to November? And so one of the things that the research has shown is that we need to go to where they are. So we need to physically move to where they are, and we also need to reach them via text or via phone. Email doesn't necessarily work that well. Some people just like avoid email. So what we're looking for is volunteers for people who can do phone banking, who can do text banking, so that we can reach those voters who have registered before March, but are maybe in the not so sure side if they're going to come out to vote, because those are the ones that are going to be extremely important when it comes to the November elections. And also one of the things that is going to be important for our community in the diaspora is to continue to educate all of not only the community members in the diaspora, but your community in Puerto Rico about, the candidates, what are the issues that are at stake, not only in the mainland of the US, but also in the mainland of Puerto Rico. Like, what are the things that we need to be concerned about and looking at, and why is it important to understand candidates' proposals because of that? Because sometimes we make the mistake of voting based on just like blind allegiance, kind of as if it were, I guess, like a baseball game and you just go for a team. But I think that there's a shift right now in terms of our cultural movement, that we are starting to gain more perspective on actually getting informed about different candidates and their proposals. So our highest hope for our diaspora community is to help us amplify that educational material and that educational content. Also to follow in Instagram Prende tu Voto, which is PRENDETUVOTO, Prende tu Voto on Instagram. We also have a webpage called prendetuvotopr.com, where you can also follow up with more information that can be amplified by different communities.
And
Thank you
I'll
so
add,
much, Aliana. Perfect. Yes.
yeah, I'll add, we have some allies on the ground, as you've heard. The parties here have not necessarily embraced this Puerto Rican messaging, but you have Unidos US that's on the ground. You heard from Karen's group, Philly Boricuas, and others who are doing this work. But I will start from our families, right? I think this is one of the things we can do when we talk to our families in Puerto Rico, and we talk to our families who may be in some of the states, right? We all have family members all over the country, and really speaking to folks about, talking to our families about the importance of voting and the connection between both of those. I think it's really important. I look at women as super voters. You take our parents to vote, we make sure our kids go out to vote, but it's planning that, right? What does election day look like? One of the things that's been encouraging as I looked at the early numbers here in Philadelphia, in Pennsylvania, we have mail-in voters. And in some of our areas where we're talking about, like in Philadelphia, for instance, the potential of having 40,000 Puerto Ricanos vote and make a huge difference, because 40,000 votes was what helped Biden win before. 80,000 Biden win and 40,000 Clinton lost, right? And when you look at those numbers, the mail-in vote, which was an area where Puerto Ricans were not participating, there is a large number of Boricuas who've received their ballots, and almost half of them are back. So every single day, people are doing this mail-in vote. And so it's hugely important that we do the messaging for the campaigns, right? We're voting. I see the questions around Luma. If we vote in our respective congressional districts, we can strongly advocate, as Powerful Puerto Rico has done so effectively, is we got to educate our congressional delegations about what Luma means, the cost of electricity. The data is there. We have the most expensive electricity in the United States or any of its territories. So we have the data. It's the information and why people need to vote. Luma does not leave unless we elect elected officials who understand that we cannot now allow this kind of monopoly to happen, and that we can't normalize what this post Maria hurricane has done to Puerto Rico. In the past, the blackouts, all of that was stuff that we saw in third world countries. Well, Puerto Rico is now living that. The restoration of our infrastructure, the protection of our natural resources, all of those things are at play. And they're at play with our congressional delegations here in the United States who know so very little. And as I mentioned earlier, in Pennsylvania, everything is on the table. Who wins the top of the ballot and the down ballots will make a difference in the House and in the Senate in the United States. And so we have an enormous amount of power that we can wield by coming out and vote and looking at the numbers. They will look at the numbers, and we can do this. I believe in our folks. I believe in our young people. I'm glad that they're angry, they're outraged. They never feel like we've done enough. What kind of country are we turning over to them? But we need that activation that they have on social media to really turn into action at the polling place. Those little margins, all those, whether it's the Gen Z, whether we're talking about, men in particular, when we're talking about our seniors and making sure they have a plan to vote, all of that will make a difference. And that's what's going to lead us to victory in the White House. And so, call your family, call your friends, make the connection for them so they see how important this is.
Thank you so much, Maria. That's a perfect segue into we do want to take a couple more questions from the audience. So thank you, everyone who has signed up already. This is very encouraging. You have an opportunity to directly get involved and make a difference. So let's move on. And actually, let's keep talking about Luma a little bit, because I did see that there are a couple of questions on there. Let's have Aliana keep going with, how do elections affect Luma? And let's see if we can have also Federico on.
Yeah, so this is a great question. Right now, that is obviously, as many of you know, that is the hot topic at the moment. All of the parties and the governor candidates are talking about Luma. And there have been there has been different parties who have swayed their opinion about Luma. Luma stays, Luma goes, and so we've seen that happen because what we have is a major discontent with the grid system, and all of the parties have kind of in unison have had to, many of them have done it out of, out of true genuine concern, and others out of concern more for acquisition of power, changed or affirmed their position on Luma. As of right now, all of the parties that are running for candidacy are against Luma staying in Puerto Rico because of that major discontent that we have in the archipelago. So what that means is that all of the parties right now and all of the candidates for governor all have the same standpoint, that Luma goes out. Like Luma goes out because we know that that is a chipping coin, right? That will sway voters either one way or the other. So that is interesting to see. What we don't necessarily have is what happens after Luma leaves, right? So that is the hard pressing question that we want Puerto Ricans to be able to ask these candidates, and that we're pushing to educate voters to really think critically about that right now. So that is definitely a big one in the Puerto Rico elections right now.
If I can tie it back to the diaspora, Luma may seem like a local utility issue, but remember that because of the hurricane, Puerto Rico has received like 18 billion with a B dollars to rebuild the electricity grid in U.S. taxpayer money that we send to Puerto Rico, and they've only used 1.3 billion out of the 17 or 18 billion. Only 1.3 billion has been used, and this private company managing the public transmission and distribution lines that has been so inefficient, that has increased power outages, that has actually brought in workers from Florida that don't know Spanish, that don't know about the tropical vegetation or how to fix a grid in a Caribbean climate. They're really botching this issue. But we also have Genera, which is the private company managing the generation with fossil fuel, and they want to bring in more natural gas to Puerto Rico because the company that owns them, New Fortress Energy, which has presence in Pennsylvania, is a natural gas company. You all know with fracking what issues that entails. Puerto Rico's an island, so bringing in natural gas every time we need it is expensive. And so these are complicated issues, but if we don't elect, like Maria said, leaders in the U.S. that are friends of Puerto Rico, that respond to diaspora voters, that can help oversee those 18 billion and mostly unused federal funding for Puerto Rico and hold Luma accountable. And that's why we need leadership in Puerto Rico, not just to say, well, Luma leaves, but the Fiscal Control Board of Puerto Rico may block that decision. So unless we have a friendly Congress and president that will hold them accountable, this issue won't be solved. So this isn't just a local story about a utility in Puerto Rico. This is intimately tied to how the diaspora views this issue.
Thank you. And Maida, did you want to add in anything? I do see someone wrote, aside from calling from removal, what, when it comes to Luma and the FMB, what resolutions are Puerto Ricans calling for? Is there anything that we want to touch on there? I do know, right, that we are calling, there's a reason why we're asking or saying, time is up.
Right. Again, a lot of it is education. How do we go solar? How do we support programs that could come in and really help Puerto Ricans make decisions about going solar, how they go solar, what are those programs? All of that is coming through federal dollars. Regulatory issues come through the feds. I think we have a lot more power and a lot more say about what those options are. And then, you know, we had the manpower and the infrastructure. The fact of the matter is, as much as Luma tries to recruit and go out and recruit workers, as Fede said, we have the capacity. We had young people on the island, and building out that infrastructure and that workforce is part of the work that we should be doing. And that's part of the leadership that we need, right? As opposed to saying, you know, we're going to outsource this and just let people come at ridiculous pay rates, right? Because, you know, the fact of the matter is, you know, when you hire and you train and you hire workers in Puerto Rico, the cost is significantly lower than with all of these independent contractors that they're bringing that are accountable to no one.
Yeah, I just only want to add that the fact of Luma on the issues of renewable energy is one of the topics, main topics that that we are seeing in our surveys doing here in South Carolina. So as correctly Federico mentioned, you know, it's something that, even though it's a local issue, just only for the island, but us here as a diaspora, we have a voice and a vote that we could use in order to resolve that issue and to make accountable who has to be accountable, and also to get the elected officials that we think could resolve that issue that is past due in Puerto Rico. You know, we having families there, and every conversation that we have every day, Luma is part of the topics. So just something that we need to be resolved.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for bringing it back to the local look, right? That's exactly what's on everyone's back of the mind. We see it in the music videos, right? It's everywhere. So, okay. Thank you all. I appreciate all of your time. I am going to turn it over back to Erica to take it home.
Hey everyone, so hang on for a few minutes because we have a special performance to close out, and you're really going to feel it with this person. So just bear with us. So quickly, I want to say, we see you. We see you on YouTube and Facebook. We see people piping in from Chicago, St. Louis, Cabo Rojo, New Jersey, and other places. So thank you. It just speaks to how committed we are from wherever we are. I want to thank this amazing panel. I mean, like, look at the Boricua brilliance that was on display entre Karen and Myra and Julio and Federico, Aliana, and Maria, and just the incredible way Christina stepped in to manage this panel amid the technical glitches. So thanks so much for the patience, the participation, and the energy, y el compromiso. And I want to say that after the elections in Puerto Rico, we know that we're all there are a lot of uncertainties. We are going to have an online session to talk about the outcomes of Puerto Rico elections and the US election, and what the agenda could look like for us as a community. And excuse me. And I want to pivot to now an incredible artist. Her name is Maria Teresa Mariposa Fernandez, and she's the author of Born Bronxenia, Poems on Identity, Love, and Survival. Her poetry has been published in Latino Poetry, the Library of American Anthology, Lift Every Voice. You've seen her on HBO, Def Jam, et cetera, and she has received foundation recognitions, including from the Mellon Foundation, and she's a lecturer in the Department of English at Lehman College, where she teaches creative writing and literature. And I want to add that she is like a poeta del pueblo. You see her everywhere around social justice issues. And she's somebody who's grounded, just someone who's like amazingly 1,000% Boricua and so committed to our community. So with that, I want to turn it over to Mariposa.
Thank you so much, Erica. It's so good to be here tonight, and I feel very honored to be asked to read Boricua en la Luna. And the request was that I begin with the English translation, Boricua on the Moon, and end with Spanish. Boricua on the Moon by Don Juan Antonio Correger. From the waves of the sea that are kisses on its shore, and Aguadilla, woman tore away to New York to sing, but alas, no, only to cry, a long wail, and die. From that lament I was born, like a beast in the rain, and I lived and waited long to collect what was lost, through a sky that grew more ugly, the more she flew. To New York closer drew, a peon from Las Marias, with the hope, she said, of someday returning. But first, she gave me birth, and from so much work, she left without returning. She expired in a sweatshop. From a tear, I am the sun, and I am a son of sweat. And Grandpa was the only one. Love in my rejoicing of the memory always fixed in that crystal of tears, like a chimera in the song of a Puerto Rico in dreams. I am Puerto Rican without nada, but without breaking dawn, breaking down. And to the arrogant who would deny me while they strut on their way, perhaps not far down the hall, they'll pay for the affront. See, as someone told me, they say that the moon is the moon, be it in the sea or be it on the mountain. And so I shout at the villain, I would be Borincano, Puerto Rican, even if I was born on the moon. Boricua en la luna. Desde las ondas del mar, que son besos a su orilla, en una mujer de Aguadilla, vino a Nueva York a cantar, pero no, solo a llorar, un largo llanto y morir. De ese llanto yo nací como la lluvia, una fiera, y vivo en larga espera de cobrar lo que perdí. Por un cielo que se hacía más feo, más volaba, a Nueva York se acercaba un peón de las Marías, con la esperanza decía de un largo día volver, pero antes me hizo nacer y de tanto trabajar se quedó sin regresar, reventó en un taller. De una lágrima soy hijo, y soy hijo del sudo, y fue mi abuelo el amor único en mi regocijo. Te recuerdo siempre fijo en aquel cristal de llanto, como quimera en el canto de un Puerto Rico en sueño. Y yo soy puertorriqueño y puertorriqueña, sin nada, pero sin quebranto. Y el echón que me desmienta, que se anda muy derecho, no sea en lo más estrecho de un zaguán, pague la afrenta, pues según alguien me cuenta, dicen que la luna es una, sea del mar o sea montuna. Y así le grito el villano, yo sería borincano, aunque naciera en la luna. Gracias.
Y que canten su tierra, del guaraguao y del pitirre, de la bomba y de la plena.